Hello everybody. Every car company in the world has a little bit of controversy about it. Each of them have their fans and their detractors. But I think none can come even close to Tesla's ability to polarize opinion. And that's without discussing the antics of its boss. Because for some, this car is all they ever needed, all they want, and it to them represents not just the future, but also the present. This is the car. Full stop, no arguments, no others will be accepted. And for others, they would rather remove intimate and personal parts of their anatomy slowly and painfully than even consider the idea of stepping into a Tesla. Myself, as a petrol head, but also more importantly car lover, I try and keep an open mind. But despite the fact that Tesla is the daddy of the EV segment, I haven't really spent that much time behind the wheel of one. And just in case you're not familiar with my content, though I love a good V12 just as much as nearly anybody else, the last time I drove a Model 3, I said I prefer to have one of these over a BMW M3. So when the car is good, I have absolutely no qualms about saying so. And many of the times that I criticize EVs, it is not the cars, but instead the infrastructure and the politics that surround them. So how exactly have I got on now I've had the chance, courtesy of Tesla, to actually live with one of their products for a week? Well, it has been a very, very interesting experience. Today is my review of the new upgraded Tesla Model 3. It's been quite the surprise. Now, as will likely become blindingly obvious through this review, I don't really speak Tesla, but in many ways I think that actually makes me fairly well positioned to talk about it from the perspective of somebody who hasn't yet taken that first bold step into buying one. And there are a whole heap of ways in which I think they do things absolutely brilliantly. There are also at least an equal number of ways in which they make decisions that are just well, they're just a bit weird, to be perfectly honest with you. But before we get onto those, I should explain to you what this is. I expect by now, if you have eyes and live in the world, you will have seen a Model 3 at some point. This was step 2 of the sexy business plan that Tesla had. Yeah, in case you didn't realize that, S3XY, yeah. Okay, I mean, the Roadster was a thing, but even Tesla themselves today kind of gloss over that. And this was a huge deal. It's easy to forget, but the Model S, which has now been around sort of forever, well, that was a really, really expensive car. I remember some of them costing £130,000 over 10 years ago. They were not cheap. But this was always built to be a more accessible, more affordable volume car. And though it looks vaguely the same as a Model S to, well, not just the untrained eye, but the trained eye, it follows the same familial language, but is a little bit smaller. And I'll actually go to bat for this one and say, I don't think it's a bad looking car. I just don't think it's a particularly pretty car either. And when you see quite so many of them, it does help reinforce the main thing that I do hold against Tesla, which is the fact they seem to be trying to do their very best to turn the car into an appliance. In much the same way that my dishwasher looks very much like my neighbour's dishwasher. Oh, except my accountant's. He's got a nice little feature in his where it raises the bottom shelf to you. Very jealous of Dom's dishwasher. But anyway, this is fine, this is nice, this is all right, but I never stop and admire one. I will, though, give Tesla credit for actually building a car. The X and the Y are more traditional large things, but this is not. It's a nice, normal sort of sized saloon. And you know what, Tesla, for that alone, I salute you. This one's been around for a little while itself now, and for 2023 and 2024, they have upgraded it. Like all major manufacturers, Tesla have factories around the world, and because they didn't roll out the update simultaneously, you could have got a new Model 3 anywhere from sort of 2023 onwards. And I believe by the time of filming, most of the gigafactories, what a daft name, I call them abattoirs of individuality, have now got the updated car. But what does that give you? Well, at a quick glance, it's kind of hard to tell. Unless, of course, the car is in this hyper red, one of two new colors. And I apologize for having to read from my phone, but the press release that Tesla gave me, well, it was formatted in such a way it's kind of impossible to print out. Other things that are new about the upgraded Model 3 include the lights, both front and rear. You have matrix LED items, which actually work fairly well. The car has a refined body and presence, apparently. Alongside the red, you also have a new shade called Stealth Grey, and if neither of those float your boat, you could also have it in white, blue, or black. Considering how many of these things are out there and how samey they all look, I would really like to see a little bit more customization available from Tesla. Pretty much the only other thing you can actually specify with these cars is the optional 19-inch wheels, which this one has. Anyway, more stuff about the upgraded car. It has the lowest absolute drag of any Tesla, 0.219. That's an incredible drag number. That is genuinely amazing. That's proper streamliner stuff from not that long ago. Very good. It has a cocoon-like cabin architecture with premium materials, including things like real aluminium and real textiles. Doesn't say real leather though. And I've got to say, actually, compared with the outgoing model, it does feel a bit nicer in there, but more on that when we're sat in it. These seats are all new, both front and rear, and up front you get both heating and ventilation, and in the back you get heating. That's all as standard. There are no trims, there are no options. Another thing I've got to give Tesla credit for, very generous standard specification. Other manufacturers could learn a lot from these guys, and yet they seem determined not to. It carries on. There is a redesigned center console covered in aluminium, expansive storage, dual wireless phone chargers. They work really well. You can fast charge laptops from the USB-C charging points in it. You have Bluetooth sync and stuff in there. There's a super bright and responsive 15.4-inch display, which is very impressive, and we will also talk about when we're inside the car, but it has now been joined by a second display in the back. So the passengers have got their own little touch screen, and via that they can control various different functions as you would expect. HVAC, infotainment, all that sort of good stuff. Perhaps more usefully though, particularly for those that already had a Model 3, the car has a major improvement in terms of NVH. So wind and road noise are reduced, impact noise is reduced. It's got double glazing pretty much all around. It's a very good thing. They also very proudly tell you that every Tesla comes with a studio quality hi-fi, and of course the new Model 3 is no exception. Now, that's a bit of a nonsense term really. Studio quality is not a defined standard. It could mean studio flat for all we care. But as a bit of an audiophile, I'll tell you, this is actually a pretty good system. And the one in the base model, what I have here today, well, that's not as good as the one in the long range and the performance. And this is already better than the upgrade stereo in many other cars. Honestly, it's another area where manufacturers should really be looking at Tesla and going, okay, they've set the standard, we need to do better. I've got tired of the number of cars I've sat in where they've already got the £2,000 or £3,000 upgrade hi-fi, and it's not as good as this. And this is another one of the ways in which I think other manufacturers need to pay attention to what Tesla are doing and the value for money that they're offering. I think there are a lot of people out there buying cars like this, not because they're an EV, not because they want to save the planet, but just because Tesla are giving them what they want. Now, other significant alterations have also been made for the new Model 3, but they are inside. So we'll discuss those in a moment. But before we get onto those, a few numbers for you. And here I do have a little bit of an issue with Tesla because they do give me some numbers, but it's very, very clear they've picked and chosen the numbers that they wanted to give me. So I can tell you, for example, there are 3 models in the Model 3 lineup. Whew, that was confusing. You have this one, the entry level, the regular, plain old Model 3, full stop. And I've got to admit, I was kind of hoping they were sending me a performance, but in a lot of ways, I'm glad that they haven't. And the reason for that will be apparent when I take it out later. This one will set you back, near as makes no difference, £40,000. Then the next up is the Model 3 long range, which then has 2 motors and a larger battery. That's £50,000. And then the top of the tree, the one that all us petrol heads like to talk about, the performance. That's £60,000. Has the same battery as the long range, but more powerful motors. What I can't tell you though is how big those batteries are or how powerful the cars are, because Tesla don't tell me. Now I believe this car has something like a 57 kilowatt hour battery pack, and I believe this rear wheel drive example makes 280 horsepower and around 310 pounds-feet of torque. That's about 420 Newton meters, which are respectable numbers, and I don't know why Tesla wouldn't quote those. But hey ho, they don't. And the battery pack actually isn't massive for this class of car, but because it is so efficient, it actually isn't a big problem. Now, other numbers they quote include the WLTP range on the 19-inch optional wheels. That's these ones. And they quote 318 miles. Now, this is where things always get tricky on any EV review, because these cars work the opposite way around to combustion engine ones, where they get their best efficiency on the motorway. EVs get their worst efficiency on the motorway. The problem is that you only really care about range on the motorway. If you're driving around a city all day, well, a car's range could be 50 miles. It's not a problem. If you're stuck in Manhattan or London, you don't need 200 miles of range. But if you are going to drive from LA to San Francisco or from London to Scotland, well, you kind of need the range. And for those journeys, this has told me that when it's absolutely brimmed and it's lovely 30-degree weather, it'll give you about 230 miles of range. So honestly, this is not Tesla's fault, because this is an independently performed test. Tesla themselves, though, will tell you that they estimate you'll get 344 miles of range from the 18-inch wheels. I mean, yes, maybe around the city you will, but refer to previous comments. They have told me the top speed is 125 miles an hour and the 0 to 60 is 5.8 seconds. But I'm not sure I believe that one, because when it comes to things like the Plaid, Tesla have developed this fondness for including a 1-foot rollout in their times. If you're not familiar with the concept, it is kind of what it sounds like. When they do a 0 to 60 or a drag race, they ignore the first 1 foot. And there are many reasons why they might do this, but in my mind, there is no reason why you would actually include that for a regular ordinary car, other than wanting to fudge the numbers. And I think when it came to stuff like the Plaid, they were so desperate to get it under 2 seconds, 0 to 60, that they included that. It's a drag racing thing, apparently. I think it's about shock in the driveline and stuff like that. But here's the thing. That's not 0 to 60, is it? That's 3 or 4 or 5 to 60. I mean, what's next? We just shave the last sort of 20 yards out of the quarter mile? I mean, come on. Your cars are so ludicrously, ridiculously fast and good, you don't need to gild that lily anymore. It's been fully gilded, okay? Just leave it. There is, however, another number I would like to quote you, which I have had independently verified, and I think is even more impressive than any power or torque or 0 to 60 figure you might have seen. That's the weight of the car. This one quoted 1,765 kilos, and that's accurate. All of the last EVs that I've driven, your Taycans and Audi RS e-trons of the world, they're well over 2 tons. A Taycan is basically 2¼ tons, half a ton heavier than this. I mean, the 3 Series weighs about this much now. The new M5 is over half a ton heavier than the Model 3 Performance. Now that is impressive. Unfortunately, when you open the door, things do get a little more complicated. I suppose I should no longer really be surprised by Tesla interiors, and yet I still am. And this is also both a good and a bad thing. There is lots to really like about this. We'll start with these seats. They look nice enough. They're very comfortable, more supportive than you might imagine them to be, and the overall ambience in here does certainly feel a step up over the old car. You've now got this customizable strip lighting, this real aluminium, and this real textile. Fun fact for you, did you know it takes the hides of 3 geography teachers to make the interior of a Model 3? There are also some odd touches, ergonomically odd touches, including the fact that there is a button here which will open the door. But there is also a latch here which will open the door. And thus far, 2 out of 3 of my passengers have just gone for that one. That's the emergency manual release. And when you use it, the car tells you off because it says you might damage the window by using that. I mean, I would have thought it was obvious that you just pressed that, but maybe that's because I was expecting it to be sort of fancy and techy. Now, in terms of storage, there is lots and lots of it in here. There's also plenty of visibility because you have not just this nice big windscreen, but also panoramic roof above you, which is excellent. Although this A-pillar, this is huge, does rather get in your way. Same can be said for the B. And in the rear, it's not quite as generous as you might think. I sat myself in there with my nice long torso. Those playing the JAYEMM drinking game, take your shot now. And I only had about that much headroom left. One good speed hump, and I would have been sat outside. The boot's pretty decent, and to be honest, for most people that aren't blessed with long torsos, you could happily get 4 of you in here, no trouble whatsoever. You have got electric adjustment for the front seats and also loads of storage. You've got a nice big bin down here, cup holders here, and of course more stuff down here too, because there is no transmission in the middle. And I am sure by now you are familiar with the Tesla format of everything on a big screen in the middle. The problem is that with the Model 3, they have really taken that to the extreme, and they have put everything on this big screen in the middle. In case you didn't know, there is no separate display for the driver. There is no nothing. Everything goes here. And I'm very much in 2 minds about that, because on the one hand, this screen is brilliant. I mean, absolutely fantastic. It is bright, it is clear, it is easy to read, it is super responsive. It does just about everything. I mean, crikey, there is even an arcade in here where you can play a game controlled by this wheel and the brake. And I did think the other day about that, and I thought, oh my word, how stupid and daft and silly is this? But then I thought, you know what? If I was like 6 or 7 or something, I would love that. I would be asking mum or dad all the time, can I go out and play in the car? And anything which makes children excited about the car, I have to support. The graphics were all right, and it all worked really, really well. Considering there are other manufacturers out there that I think would struggle to make snake work on their display, this really, honestly, it does feel like it is from a whole different world. But if you aren't of the iPad generation, this is just ludicrously difficult to navigate. Everything is a menu on a menu on a menu. Everything, of course, has to be done by touch, and it's not always particularly intuitive or logical. On occasion, I have found that it's me being daft and stupid, and that it was simple and easy to do what I wanted. But other times I found that actually, no, there is no easy or simple way to do that. And there are lots of cases of that through this car. For example, the charging port on the rear corner. You can open it easy enough, you just tap it. But to close it, well, you've got to get your phone out, because you can pair your phone with the car, and that's how they want you to do most of the stuff. If you don't have your phone on you, or if it's ran out of battery, as mobile phones like to do, you'll have to use this, which is it's the key. It's a business card in a lanyard, and because I am permanently paranoid about my phone running out of battery, I have been walking around with it every single time, get in there you, that I have had the car this week. And I feel daft. The other day I was wearing a particularly plain shirt, and I caught a glimpse of myself with lanyard, plain shirt, and a Tesla. And I felt dirty. I felt like I'd just come back from a particularly riveting conference, by which I mean a conference about riveting, where I'd been discussing mostly quarterly projections. And I felt this overwhelming urge to talk about synergy and things. It was just not right. And also, I might as well talk about it now, because I had to talk about it at some point. The dealing with Tesla bit of this review was a little irksome, because when press cars are delivered, they're always delivered in the morning. They phone you ahead to make sure that you are in, and they'll be delivered clean and full of fuel or electricity. Tesla had to wait till the afternoon to email them to find out that actually they'd had some trouble, and they probably weren't going to drop the car off on the day they said they would. And then after a bit of moaning, they did agree to drop it off. When they did, it was dirty. It also had about half a charge in it. This is a nice little cracked casing, and the previous journalist that had this, they'd left them logged in to some of the things on here, like Spotify and the like. So they hadn't properly gone through the car and wiped all of their previous settings and personal information. So when I give this car back, I'm going to be doing that myself. And that, for a data-driven and very modern company, seems like a large oversight. And I know my car being delivered a few hours late seems like a daft thing to mention in a review. Well, here's the fact. I have to assume that as press, I'm always going to be given the gold 5-star treatment. And I'm always going to be treated better than most average customers would be. So when things for me aren't particularly great, it does leave you wondering what it's like for a real Tesla customer. But I'm not a real Tesla customer. One of you, though, might be. So if you've got a Tesla of any description, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. Now, other gripes I have with this include the fact that your speedo is up here in the corner. That's it. I said in my original review of this, I think Tesla really missed a trick, because to look from there to there, your eyes have to refocus. And this screen, there is no, maybe it exists and I haven't found it, there is no like simple mode. At night, it gives you so much information all the time. It's always detecting things around you, and sometimes erroneously so. There's a few times where it's looked like a lorry is about to run me over, for example. And sometimes I just want a dirt simple display. I just want nothing in particular, but it always wants to throw so much information at you, and it's very, very distracting. And for this generation of car, Tesla have actually taken things in an even more extreme direction. Because, yeah, they could have given you a display here. They haven't. They've given the passengers in the back one. I thought you could have a nice McLaren 720S style sort of little strip down here, giving you all your basic and important stuff. Or even better, a heads-up display. That's a really nice techie solution, isn't it? But no. What they have done, though, is taken away the indicator stalk and gear lever. Nothing back here now. Nothing at all. And the indicators are here on the wheel. Now, I can't inherently moan about that, because I like Ferraris and Ferrari like sticking the indicators on the wheel, but Ferrari have learned that you do need to do it a certain way. These buttons are horrid. You sometimes get them, you sometimes don't, and in a rush, last night I was trying to flash somebody to tell them that they could move out, but instead I just wound up indicating a lot. The indicator noise, right about now you can hear it, but when you're driving, got a bit of music on, something like that, very quiet, very easily lost. All of the other functions in the car you control by these little scroll wheels here. Oh, and you might be wondering, okay, so that covers the indicators. Where did the gear lever go? Well, you know what? I sat in here for about 5 minutes trying to move the thing after the delivery guy left it with me, wondering that myself. But it's here, yeah. You scroll to put it in gear. And more worryingly, the car even has a new function that you can enable whereby it will automatically get itself out of park and into either drive or reverse. And it will choose itself. It's called Auto Shift Out of Park. And it says beta next to it. And now it's beeping because someone doesn't have the seatbelt on. Well, it's me, isn't it? Come on, you pipe. Thank you. Yeah, Auto Shift Out of Park, beta. There's lots in here that says beta, and it does worry me. Navigate on autopilot, beta. Auto steer, beta. Yeah, I don't want to see the word beta in a car, particularly when it relates to a car driving itself. And I suspect, again, because you press some of these buttons and a big disclaimer comes up, it's just them trying to cover themselves in case your car does decide to kill again. Very worrying, that. To control your lights or your wipers, which in theory are both auto, you can press one of the keys that are on the steering wheel, and you'll then get that. The auto wipers, they work fairly well most of the time, but I did drive it in the rain the other day and they were on occasion a little bit daft, doing nothing in the middle of a torrential downpour and then going crazy when the rain had gone. The lights, similarly, for the most part, they work absolutely fine. Nice matrix LEDs, auto dip dim, all that sort of stuff. They put a hole in the light for oncoming traffic and everything. But for some reason, very often, that auto high beam thing, it just turns itself off. And then when I go into the menu, it tells me that it is on, and yet the lights aren't doing it, so you have to turn it off and on again. How very IT crowd of the car. And of course, as already mentioned, there are lots and lots of things you can do with your phone as well. I believe you can summon this in a basic fashion, get it to sort of come out to you, and in America, the car can do a lot more too. In America, the Autopilot can also do a lot more. And this is one of the major gripes that I do have with the car, because here in Britain and Europe, legislation is very different to the USA. So the ability of the Autopilot and certain other systems is restricted. But they still charge you here for the full self-driving capability, £6,500, near enough. The enhanced Autopilot is over £3,000. Overall though, you know what? I've actually kind of grown to like it, and my one sole gripe at the end of this is that there really should be an option to just get rid of all of that, have a little display up here just giving you your absolute basics, so that when you just want to drive, just get things done, you can. What is it like to drive? Well, we should talk about that. And here's the real shocker of this review. I actually really like driving this car. There's something about all EVs with their general lack of noise, and here with reasonable, though not brilliant, refinement, that makes them quite a cathartic thing. This also, though it won't rearrange your organs like a performance can, is still brisk enough. Doing 50 mile an hour now, put your foot down, there's 60. That's all the performance anyone would need. On the motorway and on a couple of private roads, I've tested it a little bit beyond that, and to be fair, once you get to 60, the performance does start tailing off fairly quickly. But in just about any conceivable everyday scenario, this has more than ample shove. There are, of course, a few settings that you can configure. The accelerator can be set to either standard, as I've had it, or chill, which just blunts it, and honestly, there's no real point. There isn't an option for one-pedal driving, but the car effectively does it all the time. It will come to a complete halt, not briskly, but eventually. The brakes also have reasonable feel, but we'll get onto their outright performance fairly soon. The steering, then, you have 3 settings for that, light, medium and heavy, and it came in medium, and I very quickly set it to light, because honestly, in medium, it wasn't very nice. It was heavier than it really should be, and with no apparent feel. By setting it to light, you make it a lot easier to use, a lot more pleasant, and it still allows a little bit of information through it. I wouldn't honestly expect brilliance in a car like this, but I think it's fair to say it's been better than I thought it was going to be. The same goes for the suspension, which is actually around town a little on the firm side, but I mean just a touch, and not really that bad, probably not really even as bad as many an old Mark II Ford Focus. But then once you're on the move, it's actually pretty good. You can even have a bit of fun in the car. I've taken it through some of my more demanding test roads, and up till about 7-8 tenths, it does very, very well indeed. Once you do, though, then start to think, right, gonna have some serious fun with this, it quickly says no, 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 and throws in the towel. The chassis starts to get out of shape quite quickly, the front and rear become a little bit disjointed, but honestly, by that point, you're pushing it an amount that you really probably should have bought the Performance. That already mentioned A and B pillar. Most of the time I've had the car, they've been okay, but there have been a couple of moments where I've gone, oh crikey, I didn't see that. This is enormous, really quite distracting. You got a few other nice touches, like the fact that when you do finally get the indicators working, you get a little display on here where you can see from one of the cameras, and that's effectively your blind spot check. Though I'd really sort of prefer to just not have a blind spot, but hey ho, you can't have everything. The funky touchscreen gear lever, I must admit, I've actually kind of gotten used to it. It's in a fairly logical place, and it actually doesn't annoy me now anywhere near as much as it did a week ago. I did, though, think when I first saw it, well, what happens if this screen here breaks? And I'm fairly sure that's a very, very rare occurrence, and it might take something daft to properly break it. But if it did break, this is a very large single point of failure. Happily, I discovered quite by accident that there is actually a gear selector up here. So if you want to, you can change gear by pressing the buttons here. Don't really recommend it though. You might have also there heard just a beep because I think the car thought it saw something. And yeah, let's talk about that, shall we? Because this being a Tesla, it is full of a lot of different and some very, very clever systems. It's constantly scanning the road, telling you what it can see, where the lines are, where the cars are, what the cars are, whether they're cars, vans, lorries, cyclists. In fact, I was almost disappointed when I saw somebody walking their dog that it didn't also put the dog on the screen. This is super distracting. I mean, really, really distracting, because you kind of see it all the time. It's always catching the corner of your eye, something appears, and your natural instinct is to just try and look at it. Over time, you do eventually sort of tune it out, at which point you have to ask yourself why it's there. And there is an inherent flaw with having quite so much on this screen and it all being a touch. Yes, there is voice control, but it's also on occasion a little wonky. It hears you perfectly fine, it just doesn't understand you. So the other day I asked it to play the song From Paris to Berlin, that old club classic. And instead what it tried to do was take me to Berlin. Yeah, the inbuilt navigation is also okay, but not brilliant. A number of times it hasn't spotted a road closure or traffic that Waze and Google Maps both did. The speedo in here I have checked, and it's reasonably accurate. At an indicated 74 mile an hour, you are doing a GPS verified 72. But of course, and very much important for long journeys, this is a Tesla, and you can't talk about Teslas without talking about Autopilot. And because this is a press car, it has it. In fact, the options on this car are the alloy wheels, the red paint, and the full self-driving capability. And that is a near £6,500 option. And you thought BMW were bad for charging you 300 quid for the heated seats that they'd already fitted. Most confusingly, there are actually two paid Autopilot upgrades you can have. One is the enhanced Autopilot, that's £3,000 and a bit, and then the full self-driving. And as far as I can tell, the only real difference between the two is that the full self-driving will auto-steer. In the USA, I think it can actually also do overtakes for you on the motorway. Here it cannot. You have to tell it, and then it will move lane. It's a legislation thing. Tesla simply aren't allowed to give you the full functionality here, but they'll still charge you the full price. They're also keen to point out that if you don't option it when you buy the car, you can still retrofit it, of course, because it's software, but they might charge you an awful lot more than the £6,000 and a bit. And my first thought was £6,500 for what appears to be the same tech that Volvo were doing nearly 10 years ago seems a bit strong to me, particularly when the cars all already have all of the tech that they need in them. Tesla's tech also is based exclusively on cameras, so it's constantly filtering through all the information it gets to work out what's around it. And it's very clever. It works very well most of the time. But not all. There was an incident the other day where I was driving along and the road split from being a single lane in one direction to then two in one direction. And it sort of started to veer over because what it thought was happening was the road was just getting wider. Now it did that because, to start with, that is what happens. The road just gets wider, but it doesn't understand. It can't see far enough ahead and it can't work out what's going on. The Autopilot is also allergic to roundabouts in the most dangerous way. It will take you right up to a roundabout and then it'll just dump you into the roundabout and turn itself off. That little bong there, that was to tell me the car in front had moved. It's a nice little touch. There's lots of nice little touches in this car that I have really appreciated. And when you are on the Rainbow Road, which is what the thing shows you when you've got the full self-drive on, it does sort of work. But unfortunately, the more time I have spent with the car, the more times I have encountered rather worrying issues. For example, the other day, a friend and I were coming home from London. We were on a basically deserted piece of motorway. We were trying out the Rainbow Road, the Autopilot. We were going along, and all of a sudden, it just tried to stop. There was a walkway in front of us, and I think it mistook it for a wall. If there was another car around, we might have caused an accident. The automatic emergency braking, which if you do want the full self-drive with auto steer beta to be enabled, you have to have on. I don't know why you have to have it on all the time just so that you can sometimes use Autopilot. That's a Tesla thing. But in any case, it's tricksy. I have now set the collision avoidance to late and it has improved things. But even so, there have been a number of occasions where I've been approaching a roundabout or just approaching a parked car that you know you're going to go around and it just panics and again nearly causes an accident. Maybe most frustratingly, but the other day I was driving along a nice little country piece of road, a fairly tight one, and a digger pulled out from a building site. And he didn't look. So I was coming down a hill to be greeted by a JCB's bucket being pushed out into the road. He took up the entirety of my side of the road. Luckily, particularly for me and also for him, there was no oncoming traffic. So I was able to slow the car and get around him. And during this process, I learned three things. Number one, on occasion, the car is of no help to you whatsoever. Number two, the brakes in an emergency situation aren't really up to the task. And number three, the car passes the moose test with flying colours. It remained composed, it remained calm, it did exactly what I needed it to. That was easily the scariest moment of driving I'd had in about 10 years. And though the car itself didn't intervene, it certainly gave me the tools to make the problem go away. I was left sort of half impressed with the car because it did get around it, but half unimpressed because I really should have been able to stop in time. But I couldn't. Now, I think it is fair to say that just about every modern car has had an issue at some point in time where it's done something that we didn't want it to because a safety system has misinterpreted what's going on. But there is something unique to the way that Tesla do things. Because they use the cameras for everything, to the point that for the new car they've even deleted the parking sensors, that means you are reliant on one single point of failure. And it is a single point of failure involved in making some rather critical decisions. Now, during my time with the car, I encountered a few minor problems, like the fact when you're in a car park, because they are generally dark and underground, often featureless places, it would frequently tell me that its parking sensors just didn't work anymore because the cameras degrade the picture quality as it gets darker, and without a visual reference to triangulate or position themselves in 3D space, they didn't know what was going on. But the thing that annoyed me the most is shortly after I filmed the majority of this review, I got an email from Tesla checking in with me and asking how everything was going. And I said, you know what, there's a lot that I really love, which I've already talked to you about, but I have had a couple of issues, including the aforementioned incident where at 70 miles an hour on an abandoned motorway, the thing slammed on the brakes, trying to avoid a gantry that was sat some 20 feet above the road. And the response they gave me, I have to admit, was somewhat frustrating. I fully expected them to give me the industry standard, "Oh, we're very sorry about that, tell us a little more about when it occurred, and I promise that we'll look into it." But instead, I got this. Just to note, Enhanced Autopilot is a driver assistance program that gives the user the ability to stay in control and alert whilst aiming to smooth out some of the processes in driving. E.g., with phantom braking, you can turn it off to stop the gradual braking. It does happen occasionally, but not very prevalent. Hopefully, that was the same experience for you. No, that's not what happened at all, dear Tesla employee. Your car mistook a bridge for a wall and tried to put on the anchors. In fact, no, it did put the anchors on. That, to me, is potentially dangerous because somebody could have been following behind in not a Tesla and maybe wouldn't have expected me to stop for nothing in particular. This, to me, is indicative of a company that knows their stuff has problems, but are clearly happy to just say, well, actually, it's your fault. I don't like that at all. As a journalist, I think it is really important to point out the fact that though sure I have had issues with ADAS systems on other cars, it's chiefly lane departure related, and I have never ever had phantom braking in any other mark of car. Full stop. But the Tesla, it happened to me and a lot of other people that I speak to. Are you a Tesla owner? Please, I'd love to hear more of your real world experience. That's frustrating, that. Anyway, back to the video. This little section here, that's nice and rough. The turn-in on it's really quite keen. Honestly, you can have quite a bit of fun, and because it's rear-wheel drive, you do feel that back end coming into play. You can't disable traction or anything like that. I mean, there's a slip start option, they call it, but I did try and see if I could get anything out of the tyres the other day, but no, nothing whatsoever. Unlike the last electric press car that I had, though, I have really made an effort to put the miles on this one, despite the fact Tesla made me promise I wouldn't do more than 200 a day. Did 400 the other day. I'm just going to assume they meant as an average. Anyway, on a long journey, it's actually a relatively good companion. Up until the point when it decides on the motorway just starts slowing down for no reason whatsoever. And I don't just mean because it's seen what it thinks is a wall, but also because the other day I was approaching the turning for a junction and the car just started slowing down all on its own. And I got so panicked and so worried trying to work out what was going wrong, what the car could see that I couldn't, I missed my turning. Oh my word. And I didn't previously know what it was, but nearly all of the really atrocious driving that I see today is people driving Teslas. And now I sort of understand, because the car is constantly telling me something, beeping at me, trying to do something itself, and I'm never really sure ever whether it's being helpful or just being a bit weird. On the front of being a bit weird, though I did get used to the gear shift, these indicators, no. They are a horrendous idea. Something like indicators, they should be easy, they should be responsive, turning circle's not good either, and they should just be something you don't have to worry about. These I am constantly getting wrong. Just the feel of it, it's not nice. And you know full well the only reason they did it this way is because it was cheaper. And these aren't particularly cheap cars anymore. I mean, this one optioned up is £50,000. And you know, with the way the EVs are depreciating at the moment, after about half an hour, it's probably going to be worth 30p. And you know what? I mean, I'm amazed these aren't involved in more accidents. It's just as well it's got 101 different ways to stop you having a crash, because it's got 100 ways to make you have an accident. Between the poor visibility, the horrid indicators, the mystery slowdowns, oh, and the fact that it's got a karaoke machine in it. Yeah. I mean, there's Netflix, YouTube, Disney Plus, all that stuff, but you can't watch those while you're driving because obviously that would be dangerous. However, to put every single other control over here, that's okay. On a touchscreen, that's okay. Have to distract yourself from the road just to make the cabin a bit warmer, cooler, yeah, that's fine, that's okay. To put the Golden Girls on though, that's dangerous. And yeah, a karaoke machine. And you know what's really frustrating? You know what's really annoying? It's brilliant. It's an amazing karaoke machine. It's got a load of great songs on it. The way that it displays the lyrics, it works absolutely perfectly. And it makes being in this car with friends an absolute and complete blast. And they got that absolutely, totally spot on. But indicators, they didn't. However, I'll tell you something though, this car, of all of the EVs I have had, this has been the one where the EV side of it, the EV ownership bit, has been by far the most pleasant. I have charged this car chiefly at Tesla's own superchargers, of which there's a fairly good network. There aren't too many very close to where I live, but that's because there isn't anything near to where I live. But whenever I've done a journey, there's generally been one, and if need be, it will also put one automatically into your journey plan. On occasion, that's been frustrating because it's done it a few times when I haven't asked it to, and it doesn't even say, would you like to stop at this place? I'd get it if you planned a 500-mile journey, and of course you couldn't make that, but on occasion, I've had 150 miles of range left, and I'm doing a 100-mile journey, and it still put a supercharger stop in there. Which sometimes is a diversion, sometimes it's not. But of course, if you're just following the sat-nav blindly, you might not have noticed the fact it snuck in an extra stop for you. However, the experience of being at a Tesla supercharger, oh my word, they've got it absolutely perfect. Because this car has an account, and Tesla sneakily, because of that, they've paid for most of the electricity this week, thinking I won't notice how much it costs. Anyway, you pull up at a supercharger, you unplug the thing, plug it in. It just does it. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That's how it should be. No tapping, no swiping, no nonsense. It just works. Although, if it's a busy one, it won't want to charge the car beyond 80%. You can override it, of course, but yeah. It's another one of these things that, again, it's not a Tesla's fault, but I do get irked with companies where they quote a peak charging rate or a charge time that's, say, 10 to 80%, but then they'll quote their range with a car that's got 100% battery. That's not right, is it? Now, I did do a quick little bit of maths the other day, and I worked out that with most superchargers being in the sort of 40-odd pence per kilowatt hour range, running one of these is roughly the same as running a reasonably economical diesel. And you know something? If I had to go somewhere, I had to do a relatively boring, ordinary journey, and you gave me the choice of this or a BMW 320d, I'd take the keycard for the Tesla every single time. I really would. It's just a pleasant place to be. It's nice. It's got all the toys. It's got a great stereo. It's calm. It's comfortable. When you want to have fun, you can. What terrifies me, what absolutely petrifies me, is just how much stuff they put on this screen, how many different ways they have given people to be distracted, and how many fundamental things in this car, like the cruise control, like the indicators, which are real absolute basics, and those, they just don't work right. They should. They really, really need to. There is no excuse for it to be any other way. And yet somehow they don't care. I don't get that. I know the car is improving itself all the time. I know the car is getting better all the time. But there are certain fundamental things, like I spoke to somebody recently and they said, oh, the new update for the Teslas, it's amazing, the wipers now work properly. Why did the wipers not work properly before? There's so many little things like that where you're just like, oh, come on. You know, somebody has spent more time making it make duck noises when you lock it than they have going, these indicators need work. I mean, best karaoke machine I've ever driven. And it's really not a bad car either. And I gotta say something, I'm kind of glad that it is maybe as flawed as it is, because all of the other manufacturers out there, they really, really need to start looking at cars like this. Ignore silly nonsense stuff like the Cybertruck, right? This is the car that people like BMW, Ford and so on need to be afraid of, because this shows you in a huge number of ways how it should be done. I get why Tesla are number one. I mean, half tempted to buy an old Model 3 Performance myself. They're dirt cheap. And to be honest with you, I think the only reason I sort of haven't is because they are all just so painfully samey. I feel like I want to pull up at the supercharger, plug the car in and just go, the greater good. There we have it. That is my brutally honest review of the Tesla Model 3. Oh, and if you didn't really like the title of this video and you felt it was needlessly clickbaity and designed simply to get a rise out of you and get a reaction, ignoring whether it was accurate or not, well, I'm just taking the spirit of Tesla's boss to heart. Anyway, I want to say a thank you to Tesla for lending me a car, possibly the last time, and to you for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, comment down below, especially if you are a Tesla owner. What have I got right? What have I got wrong? Do tell me, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.